Civil 20, India 2023 envisions a conception of civil society 2.0 in a world where individual, family, society, market, and state can understand their respective roles better and supplement each other rather than engaging in conflicts. This year, the C20 symbolizes the flame of hope, self-motivation, and selfless service.
Amma is grateful to the Indian government for arranging such a high-quality meeting. All the issues raised here are vitally important. This should go beyond a mere physical meeting and become a true meeting, a meeting of hearts and minds. This is the only way to awaken ourselves and others.
This year, C20 working groups will focus on integrated holistic health, mind, body, and environment, sustainable and resilient communities, climate, environment, and net zero targets, education and digital transformation, gender equality and disability, technology, security, and transparency, lifestyle for environment, preservation and conservation of traditional arts, crafts, and culture, human rights as human values, revival of rivers and water management, seva, sense of service, philanthropy, and volunteerism. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the world is one family. Diversity, inclusion, and mutual respect. SDG 16 and promoting civic space. Delivering democracy through participatory governance.
Om Amriteshwaryai Namaha. Namaste. My humble salutations to the C20 Chair, Her Holiness, Mata Amritanandamayi Devi, Amma, and my wholehearted greetings and a warm welcome to all the distinguished personalities present here. Namaste and Namaskarams. A very good morning to all our dignitaries, guests, civil society organizations, the entire Civil 20 engagement group, and participants from across the globe. We welcome you to the inaugural event of the Civil 20 Working Group on Gender Equality and Disability. At the onset, let us invoke the presence and blessings of the Supreme Consciousness that manifests in all of creation.
Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om. Dhyayamo dhavanavagunthanavatim tejomayim naishtikim snigdhapangavilokinim bhagavatim mantasmitashrimukhim vatsalyamritavarshinim sumadhuram sankirtanalapinim Syamangim madhusiktasuktim amritanandatmikam
Thank you. For all our viewers, please note, auto captions are available for the event. You can turn it on by clicking the options and then enable captions. Additionally, we also have a sign language interpreter for the duration of the event. You can pin them to your screen. To offer the welcome address, I now invite the Indian coordinator of the Working Group on Gender Equality and Disability, Dr. Bhavani Rao. She is the Dean of the School of Social and Behavioral Sciences of Amrita Vishwa Vidyapeetham, a top-ranked university in India. She is also the director of 2 research centers, Amachi Labs and Center for Women's Empowerment and Gender Equality. She has been appointed as India's UNESCO Chair in Gender Equality since 2016. Since 2009, she has led many field and research projects funded by international and national institutions, including UN agencies and the Government of India. Her work focuses on empowering vulnerable communities, especially rural women, in different areas of their life, including skills for livelihoods, environmental stewardship, 25,000 personnel from the paramilitary forces. Dr. Rao.
Thank you so much, Radhika. A heartfelt welcome to all of you present now for the inaugural meeting of C20 India 2023's Working Group on Gender Equality and Disabilities. For us here in India, we find this a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to work at an international scale, to possibly positively affect the lives of 2/3 of the world's population inhabiting the G20 countries. What an opportunity to serve. We pray that we take the next steps with our ears to the ground, our hearts in sync with each other, and our fingers on our keypads working towards creating pithy, powerful recommendations on behalf of the civil society from across the G20 countries. We hope to thus transform our effort in the following months to reflect the tagline of this year's C20, You Are the Light. The C20 India Chair, Sri Mata Amritanandamayi Devi Amma, founder of the Mata Amritanandamayi Mutt, is a mind-blowing example of one individual's capacity to reach across international borders, cultures, languages, religions, and to inspire others to be the light. And in keeping with the work group's title, our chair is also a woman from a disadvantaged background and community who has set an example through her life and her actions. Her network of organizations across the world, collectively known as Embracing the World, reflecting on this working group alone, currently serves several hundreds of thousands of women all over the world and runs institutions and projects for the disabled in India and Africa and in Europe. We welcome her constant inspirations and guidance to this program, into our efforts, and for the rest of the G20 sprint. With Amma, there are other stellar individuals here today, showing their commitment to the cause of gender equality and disability, the all-powerful enabler, the Government of India, incredible people of purpose and passion representing the C20, the CSO universe, along with highly erudite knowledge partners gracing us with their tremendous experience. It is my pleasure and honor to introduce and welcome them to you all. First, I would like to introduce and welcome our honorable chief guest, who will be joining us shortly. She's not right here at this very minute, but she will join us in a few minutes. The Honorable Shri Rekha Arya. She is the Minister for Women Empowerment and Child Development, Government of Uttarakhand. A stalwart of women's empowerment, Honorable Minister Rekha Arya shows us government at its best. She's one of the youngest and the only woman in the cabinet of ministers in her state, Uttarakhand. And in the present cabinet, she holds portfolios not just for women empowerment and child development, but also for food and civil supplies and consumer affairs, along with sports and youth welfare. She has expanded the agenda of gender equality by including women empowerment in Uttarakhand's policies. She has done this by providing marginalized women with the employment opportunities within her state. She has engaged women in animal husbandry, among others, opening up ways for them to earn better. She has worked extensively in education, skill development, and employment opportunities for girls and women, a vision of making women self-independent and empowering them. Her approach of including women and children in the monitoring of various schemes and keeping them right in the forefront is quite unique. She is known to be dynamic for her speed and for her positive change and among the members of her constituency, not just now as when she is a minister, but even at the time when she was an MLA. So please join me in welcoming our chief guest, Sri Rekha Arya. Next, with deep respect and admiration, I would like to introduce and welcome Swami Amrita Swarupananda Puri. Swami Amrita Swarupananda Puri is the official representative of the C20 chair, Sri Mata Amritanandamayi Devi, Amma. Swamiji is Amma's senior most disciple. He is the vice chairman of the Mata Amritanandamayi Math and the president of Amrita University. He holds a master's in philosophy and is a renowned author and translator and has written many books, including Amma's biography. He has also compiled and translated into English more than 10 volumes of conversation between Amma and her close disciples and devotees. He is a brilliant orator. He's a magnificent singer and a composer of devotional songs and has been traveling the world with Amma in her service. Please welcome Swami Amrita Swarupananda Puri. Now I introduce a legend in Indian diplomacy and a gentle giant, Ambassador Sri Vijay K. Nambiar. Ambassador Nambiar has served as the former special advisor to the UN Secretary General, Sri Ban Ki-moon. Prior to this, he was Deputy National Security Advisor to the Government of India and the head of the National Security Council Secretariat. He has also served as the ambassador to several countries in Asia and the US. During the course of his professional career in the Indian Foreign Service, he has served in numerous bilateral and multilateral appointments in Beijing, Belgrade, and New York. He was involved at the delegation level in numerous UN and non-aligned summit and ministerial conferences since 1979. He is currently the Sherpa, the primary coordinator of the Civil 20. Please join me in welcoming Sri Nambiar sir. Welcoming now the civil society of India and abroad. The spirit of selfless service is what drives civil society. No other G20 group can boast of such passionate advocates for a higher cause. All causes are noble and for the betterment of humankind and its relationship with the environment, towards peace and universal well-being. There are so many wonderful people here as partners, as participants. A very warm welcome to all of you. Welcoming members of the Troika, the Steering Committee, the International Advisory Committee for the C20, members of the C20 Secretariat, Rambo Malki Prabodhini, the core members of the C20, the Satsang Foundation and the Vivekananda Kendra in Kanyakumari, as well as the advisory board members of our working group on gender equality and disability, members and chairs of other engagement groups, notably Dr. Sandhya Purecha from the W20. A very warm welcome to all of you today. We would also like to invite our working partners from the UN system and from the higher education system, especially Vice Chancellor Professor Nilofer Khan and Professor Tanveer Shah from the University of Kashmir. I now turn to the pillars of the working group, Meg Jones. She is the international co-coordinator of this working group. She is an expert in gender and trade, having held senior roles in economic empowerment at the United Nations for over a decade. She now specializes in global flower trade. In the context of G20, Meg led the team at the United Nations that supported the establishment of the W20 engagement group under the presidency of the government of Turkey, working with civil society organizations to identify policy priorities, recommendations, and implementation strategies. Meg has held several positions in the United Nations as the Chief Economic Empowerment at UN Women in New York, Program Manager for Women and Trade at the International Trade Center in Geneva, the Desk Officer for South Asia at the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, where she also was responsible for the coordination of cooperation in the Asia Pacific region. It is Meg's lived experience that small groups of people can create change where they choose to be the light. A very warm welcome, Meg. Another pillar is Nidhi Goyalji. She is co-coordinator for this working group and a member of the C20 steering committee. She is the founder and executive director of the leading award-winning nonprofit organization, Rising Flame, working for leadership and rights of women, youth, and persons with disabilities in India. She has been working on disability rights and gender justice for the past 12 years at the national, regional, and global levels through research, writing, policy influence, and art. As a disability, diversity, and inclusion specialist, she has advised numerous national and global organizations from the National Human Rights Commission in India, Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry, the Dutch Ministry, and UN Women, to name a few. She has led multi-stakeholder and cross-movement work, influenced policies and systems, authored groundbreaking research, all with a vision to foster inclusion of women and youth with disabilities within India and globally across 4 continents and in over 20 countries. Please join me in welcome Nidhi Goyalji. A resounding welcome from the entire team working for the cause of gender equality and disability under the C20 flag. Again, a very warm welcome to all the participants, to all the viewers, and to all our special guests today. Thank you for being here today. Over to you, Radhika.
Thank you, Dr. Bhavani Rao, for that wonderful introduction of our honorary guests, experts, members, and supporters. Today, let us also remember a beautiful prayer from Sanatana Dharma, which reads, "May noble thoughts and ideals come to us from everywhere." Viewers, on your screen now, we will be playing a message by the C20 chair for 2023, Sri Mata Amritanandamayi Devi herself, and echoing her sentiments to the cause of upliftment, the most vulnerable. We also have an announcement from the official representative of the C20 chair, Swami Amrita Vishwa Vidyapeetham.
ലിംഗ സമത്വത്തെക്കുറിച്ച് പറയുമ്പം ലോകത്തിൽ പലരും സ്ത്രീകളെ രണ്ടാം തരക്കാരായിട്ടാണ് കാണുന്നത്. സയൻസും സാങ്കേതികവിദ്യയും വളർന്നു, ലോകം പുരോഗമിക്കുന്നു, മനുഷ്യൻ കൂടുതൽ പരിഷ്കാരികളാകുന്നു എന്നൊക്കെ പറയുമ്പോഴും സ്ത്രീയെ അംഗീകരിക്കുന്ന കാര്യത്തിൽ ആഴത്തിൽ എവിടെയോ ഒരു മുടക്കവും വിമിഷ്ടവുമാണ്. ലോകമെമ്പാടുമുള്ള 15-നും 19-നും ഇടയ്ക്ക് പ്രായമുള്ള കുട്ടികളിൽ 4-ൽ ഒരാൾക്ക് വിദ്യാഭ്യാസവും ജോലിയും നിഷേധിക്കപ്പെടുന്നു. എന്നാൽ ആൺകുട്ടികളുടെ കാര്യത്തിൽ 10-ൽ ഒരാൾക്ക് മാത്രമാണ് ഈ സാഹചര്യമുള്ളത്. മറ്റൊരു പ്രധാന വിഷയം ദുർബല വിഭാഗത്തിൽപ്പെടുന്ന സ്ത്രീകളെയും കുട്ടികളെയും ശാക്തീകരിക്കുക എന്നുള്ളതാണ്. അവരെ കൈപിടിച്ചുയർത്തുന്നത് നമ്മളൊരു യജ്ഞമായി എടുക്കണം. അവരിൽ ഉറങ്ങിടക്കുന്ന കഴിവുകളെ അവരുടെ സ്വന്തം ഉന്നമനത്തിനും സമൂഹത്തിൻ്റെ വളർച്ചയ്ക്കും ഉപയോഗിക്കാതെ നഷ്ടമാക്കരുത്. സ്ത്രീകളെ പിന്തള്ളുമ്പം മൊത്തം ജനസംഖ്യയുടെ 50% കർമ്മശേഷിയും സമൂഹത്തിനുള്ള സംഭാവനയാണ് ലോകത്തിന് നഷ്ടമാകുന്നത്. സ്ത്രീകളെയും അബലകളെയും ആദരിക്കുവാനും സഹായിക്കാനുമുള്ള അവബോധം ആൺകുട്ടികളിൽ ചെറുപ്പത്തിൽ തന്നെ വളർത്തിയെടുക്കുക. ഒരു കാര്യം വ്യക്തമാണ്, ഇന്ന് മാനവരാശി നേരിട്ടുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്നതും സംഭവിക്കാനിരിക്കുന്നതുമായ അനർത്ഥങ്ങൾക്ക് ശാശ്വതമായ പരിഹാരമുണ്ടാകണമെങ്കിൽ മനുഷ്യനവൻ്റെ ആന്തരികമായ കാലാവസ്ഥയ്ക്ക് കൂടി മാറ്റം വരുത്താൻ തയ്യാറാകണം. കാരണം ബാഹ്യമായി സംഭവിക്കുന്ന ആഗോളതാപനവും കാലാവസ്ഥ വ്യതിയാനവും മനുഷ്യൻ അവൻ്റെ മനസ്സിൽ സൃഷ്ടിക്കുന്ന ദുഷിച്ച കാലാവസ്ഥയുടെ പ്രതിഫലനമാണ്.
Amma is happy to announce that the Mata Amritanandamayi Mutt and the MS Center, United States of America, will spend rupees 50 crores, which is $5 million over the next 12 months as part of our C20 engagement. അടുത്ത ഒരു വർഷത്തിനുള്ളിൽ മാതാ അമൃതാനന്ദമയി മഠവും മാതാ അമൃതാനന്ദമയി സെന്റർ അമേരിക്കയും ചേർന്ന് ഈ 50 കോടി രൂപ, അതായത് ഏതാണ്ട് $6.5 മില്യൺ C20യുടെ പ്രവർത്തനങ്ങൾക്കായി ഉപയോഗിക്കുന്നതാണ്. We propose to spend this amount in the activities related to the welfare of the differently abled, വിഭിന്ന ശേഷിയുള്ളവർക്ക്, and to address malnutrition, പോഷണ വൈകല്യം among pregnant mothers. വിഭിന്ന ശേഷി ഉള്ളവരുടെ ഉദ്ധാരണത്തിനും അതുപോലെ തന്നെ പോഷണ വൈകല്യമുള്ള ഗർഭിണികളുടെയും ഉന്നമനത്തിനായി ഈ തുക വിനിയോഗിക്കുന്നതാണ്. We will take up these programs in selected aspirational districts, which are the underdeveloped districts, അവികസിത ജില്ലകളിലെ of our country and also in some other developing countries, not only inside the country but outside the country as well. We hope to work closely with the local civil society organization and the people of these countries in executing these two initiatives. We want to bring about a tangible change in the lives of the beneficiaries. Through these two initiatives, we propose to establish this an udaharan, best practice or example, which could subsequently be adopted by other CSOs and governments all over the world. ഇത് പ്രധാനമായും ഇനിയും വരുന്ന C20 പ്രസിഡൻസി ഏറ്റെടുക്കുന്ന രാജ്യങ്ങളുടെ അവിടുത്തെ NGOs അല്ലെങ്കിൽ CSOസിന് ഒരു ഉദാഹരണമായ ഒരു മാതൃകയായി ഇത് ഭവിക്കട്ടെ എന്ന് പ്രാർത്ഥിക്കുകയാണ്. ഈ പദ്ധതിയിലേക്ക്, ഇതിൻ്റെ പ്രവർത്തനങ്ങളിലേക്ക് എല്ലാ രാജ്യങ്ങളിലെയും സിവിൽ 20യുടെ വക്താക്കളെ, അവരുടെ പ്രതിനിധികളെ ഞങ്ങൾ ആദരപൂർവ്വം ക്ഷണിക്കുന്നു. ഓം അമൃതീശ്വരിയൈ നമഃ. താങ്ക് യു സോ മച്ച്.
May your profound wisdom and experience from having listened to millions from across the globe continue to inspire us to deliberation and right action. And now for a quick introduction and an overview of our working groups. Kindly stay tuned to your screens as we play the video introducing the topics covered under Gender Equality and Disability for Civil 20 India 2023.
India's ancient and rich tradition of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the whole world is one family, is founded upon the inherent oneness of all of humankind. Yet, the collective strength of our global family has diminished due to many complex challenges. Gender equality and disability inclusion are human rights and essential for a peaceful, prosperous, and sustainable world. Social inclusion is vital for an individual's dignity, security, and opportunity to lead a better life. Yet, women are often marginalized, and persons with disabilities are systematically excluded. Shri Mata Amritanandamayi Devi, chair of the C20, emphasizes the importance of unity in diversity and underscores fundamental human values such as solidarity and active civic engagement for inclusive societies. Inspired by this conviction, the C20 Working Group on Gender Equality and Disability will signpost how G20 members can address gender inequality and discrimination, and identify ways to improve access to education, livelihood, health, safety, security, and basic resources for social and economic empowerment of persons across genders and disabilities. Building on this mission, and in close dialogue with civil society organizations from G20 countries, this working group will identify high-impact policy recommendations for implementation in key areas including physical and mental health, economic empowerment and sustainable livelihoods, education and skill development, society and culture, safety and security, environment and disasters, disability inclusion, women and the environment, and addressing root causes of inequality by engaging men and boys. Our working group builds on recommendations of previous C20 deliberations, reinforcing the need to mainstream and institutionalize gender equity and inclusion in all G20 countries across all sectors for women and disabled persons. We look forward to joining hands as one global family to solve today's most pressing issues.
Thank you. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we will hear from the official representative of the C20 chair, Sri Mata Amritanandamayi's senior most disciple, Swami Amrita Swarupananda Puri ji.
Om Amriteshwariyai Namaha. I humbly bow down at Amma's lotus feet. My namaskarams to all the dignitaries gathered here. Gender inequality and disability. It's a topic that is widely discussed. In fact, gender inequality is in itself a disability that exists in the minds of men all over the world. Actually, there is a multi-generational problem that can be resolved. This is a multi-generational problem that can be resolved by taking 3 simple steps. 1, acceptance. 2, recognition. 3, respect. This change of attitude should begin with men. Let them learn to accept, recognize, and respect women, which will gradually lead to the resolution of one of the most significant problems on the planet today. That said, I must also say that it is not as simple as stated, because the physical, emotional, and intellectual conditioning in both men and women are ages old. But this continuing conditioning can be overcome, and it must happen, or else the situation can go from bad to worse, with men becoming more and more masculine, and women, in their effort to fight their way forward, will also become masculine, thereby staking their feminine qualities. This will lead to a state of utter imbalance. And my only prayer is that the division between men and women, feminism and anti-feminism, should not result in hate and parallel functioning within and without. That would be disastrous. Amma says women are not inferior to men on the basis of intellectual power or ability. In reality, women have more willpower, patience, faith, perseverance, and love, because they are creators. Their creative energy is far superior to men's. Hence, women can undertake any type of work and can attain extraordinary heights. For this to materialize, men should pave the path for women to come to the forefront and refrain from blocking their onward journey. Unquote. All over the world, politicians and people from all walks of life speak about democracy. However, our world is yet to discover that dreamland. Democracy will remain a far cry without financial, political, employment, and pay equalities. If you go back in history, men were the cause of all wars. They killed, destroyed, conquered of the world and nature. And we admire those dictators as great men, great rulers and reformers. So as Amma puts it, I quote, mothers should lead. The reins of the future world should be in the hands of women, in the hands of good mothers, because good mothers are also not only loving, but also are good disciplinarians. Amma continues, instead of contradicting each other, men and women should learn to complement each other. Every man should develop an inner womb to conceive love, patience, and compassion. Similarly, along with the feminine qualities, every woman should develop masculine qualities as well. So we should create an inner balance. Of course, outer balance is also necessary, but this inner balance is also indispensable. Each man and woman should become ardhanarishwaras, as in Sanatana Dharma, half masculine and half feminine. Speaking from a psychological point of view, just like two faces or even two leaves are not the same, men and women are not equal. However, women should be given all freedom and opportunity to express their unparalleled nature. Her unique inner potential and her extraordinary capability to create and transform should be respected and given due importance and ample opportunity. Actress Emma Watson gave a speech at the UN headquarters in New York on the 21st September 2014. In her address, she said, I quote, men, gender equality is your issue too. She continued, men don't have the benefits of equality either. We don't often talk about men being imprisoned by gender difference. If men don't have to be aggressive in order to be accepted, women won't feel compelled to be submissive. If men don't have to control, women won't have to be controlled. Both men and women should feel free to be sensitive. Both men and women should feel free to be strong. It is time that we all see gender as a spectrum instead of two sets of opposing ideals. I unquote, Amma's life is an ultimate success story of how women can rise to the highest point of existence. Her life and actions are living proofs that it is possible to transcend all barriers and obstacles, be they gender, religion, language, caste, finances, or education, to create balance and harmony throughout humanity. The Khaleej Times, one of the leading daily newspapers in Dubai, UAE, United Arab Emirates, highlighted the following article in its December 9, 2011 edition. Prime Minister Mr. Manmohan Singh's call to Indian scientists living abroad to return to India to help the country break into the big league of developed countries did not bring many, despite many incentives. But a woman who has studied only up to 4th grade is bringing some of the best brains back. The much touted reversal of brain drain is being catalyzed by Mata Amritanandamayi, who has emerged as one of India's leading spiritual leaders by breaking caste, social, economic, educational, and several other barriers. Amritanandamayi, who is popularly called Amma, has been attracting top scientists from across the world, not by throwing huge sums of money, but by impressing upon them a higher sense of service. Amma's biological mother was a very traditional lady. Conversely, even as a little girl, Amma used to be very forthcoming and unconventional in her ways. Hence, Amma's mother always used to advise her, I quote, girls should not run. They should walk with the gentle steps. They shouldn't speak loudly. Even the walls of their room shouldn't hear their speech. Girls should do all the household chores. They shouldn't go out after sunset. Suppose a man enters the room, even if it is their own brother who is younger to them, they should stand up from their place and respect them, etc., etc. Unquote. From there, Amma transformed into what she is now. Amma is the type of leader who personally comes out into the field, rolling up her sleeves and making herself available to do any type of work. Crossing all barriers, this 5-foot-tall figure of Amma, born and brought up in a remote village in southern India, has created a revolution in the conventional system. Amma bestows on the world a new, deeper dimension to love, the way it should be expressed, its power to transform, and how vital it is in human life. Nobody asked Amma to serve society, to help the poor and needy, to sit for hours on end and listen to people and to undertake the massive humanitarian activities. She does it because it is like her life breath. And she makes us feel all of us can do the same thing. I'm reminded of Mark Twain's words. Keep away from people who belittle your ambitions. Small people always do that. But the really great make you feel that you too can become great. I unquote. Perhaps Amma's life and actions are inimitable, but still, isn't it worth studying her life and finding out what qualities made her achieve what she has accomplished? There is an interesting verse in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 3, verse 21. Yadyadajarati sreshta statta devetaro janaha sayat pramanam gurude logas tadanu vartate. Whatever an ideal person does, so do other people. Imitate him or her. Whatever standard she sets, he sets, other people follow. Arjuna, an unmatchable warrior of his times, was almost on the verge of running away from the battlefield. He almost fainted right in the middle of his karma bhumi, where he has to act, where he came face to face with the reality of life, the greatest challenge he was supposed to encounter. Lord Krishna had to shoulder the responsibility of motivating the deluded warrior by awakening him to action. So Krishna tells Arjuna, listen, my dear boy, the disposition of a truly powerful person is the ability to remain well balanced and detached in all situations of life. Whereas look at you, you are acting like a coward. Now, listen carefully, you speak like a philosopher, and at the same time, your actions contradict your words. Remember, the way you perform now will be observed and emulated by generations to come, and actions speak louder than words. So don't get stuck in the past or future. Be here in the present and face the crisis with equanimity and valor. The best way to lead, I unquote, the best way to lead is by example. Amma is established in that. She is a wonderful example for all women in the world, and even for all those who are physically, mentally, and emotionally disabled. I recall Nelson Mandela's words, a leader is like a shepherd. She stays or he stays behind the flock, letting the nimblest to go out ahead, whereupon the others follow. not realizing that all along they are being directed from behind. Women and men have a long way to go to reach the dreamland of democracy and gender equality. Both are conditioned. It is not easy to disentangle the chain that binds them. However, together, we must make it possible. So let us not stop our efforts to overcome the weaknesses and limitations. Allow me to quote a beautiful verse from one of the major Upanishads, the Aitareya Brahmanam. Charan vai madhuvindadi, charan swadu mudambaram, suryasya pashyashremanam, yona tandrayade charam charayvedi. Meaning, the honeybee by its motion collects honey, and birds enjoy tasty fruits by constant movement. The sun is revered by virtue of its constant shining movement. Therefore, one should be constantly in motion. Keep moving on. Unquote. Even though the call of the Upanishad, the scripture, is mainly directed to the long journey of a spiritual seeker, it is equally applicable to every one of us working in all areas of life. Each verse of the Upanishad ends with Charayvedi, meaning, O traveler, march along, never stop. We are all travelers in the world, right? So whenever there is a crisis in life, whatever it may be, the best way, the most effective mantra to deal with the situation is Charayvedi, meaning, O traveler, each one of us is a traveler. March along. Keep moving forward. Because travelers are supposed to keep moving, or else they will never arrive at their destinations. May Amma's love and light guide us along the right path. Thank you so much. Om Amrita Vishwa Vidyapeetham.
Thank you, Swamiji, for sharing with us your rich knowledge and reiterating the need for collective inner transformation, not just for men, but women and all other genders. May we light our little candles and remember, you are the light. Glad to let you know, dear viewers, that we're being joined by over 360 plus viewers from across the globe. And at this moment, we would request everybody and everyone to kindly turn on their cameras and pose for our shutterbugs as we take pictures. Dear viewers, we will be taking pictures soon. So kindly turn on your cameras and get ready to flash a lovely smile. Hold it for a few seconds as our ace photographers capture this moment for us. 1, 2, and 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We're going across the screens. So please be with us. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Stay with us with your cameras turned on if your bandwidth permits. And thank you, dear viewers. You can also follow us on Amachi Labs and Center for Women's Empowerment and Gender Equality on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, where you will find these pictures very soon and also learn about the exciting work that our lab has been engaged in. And onward we go, steering and guiding us forward steadily is the C20 Sherpa. Let us hear now from Sri Vijay Nambirji.
Thank you. That was a very deeply inspiring address by Swamiji. Let me start by mentioning how honored I am to participate today at this inaugural session of the working group on promoting gender equality and protection of persons with disability. The theme of India's presidency of the G20, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, calls on each one of us to eschew narrow sentiments of individual proprietorship, of mine and thine, as it were, and to embrace a wider perspective that celebrates the bounties of nature and the world around us in a spirit of unity, respect, and compassion. Now, acceptance of the world as a family implies an implicit readiness to reduce basic gender inequalities without compromising on diversity. This must be more than just a familiar buzzword or shibboleth passed around in our discourse for reasons of political correctness. We need to recognize at a global scale the need to bring to the discussion of these issues what someone called a new passion and credibility, as well as a purity of purpose. As chair of the C20, Amma exemplifies a vision of civil society where the individual and the family, as well as society, markets, and the state understand their respective roles, and they work not in conflict or competition, but to supplement each other in an overall harmony. The work of India's civil society groups cut across a multitude of sectors. As you are all aware, we have set up 14 working groups under a variety of thematic heads. These are set up in accordance with the Osaka principles, representing both a continuity in our traditional global concerns, as well as newer priorities of relevance to a changing world and reflecting the concerns of the host country. Reducing inequalities and increasing inclusivity, gender equality, and protection of persons of disability are major themes that have preoccupied successive summits of the G20 and must be of paramount concern at this summit too. At the C20 level, our working group on gender equality and disability must therefore go deeply into the needs and fresh challenges of the most vulnerable, ensure they are heard and acknowledged, and to identify ways to nurture inclusion and create pathways to shed stereotypes and adopt fresh perspectives while preserving the received wisdom of our forebears where they support these goals. Today, the world is in the middle of an escalating hunger crisis, which is affecting almost 350 million people across 82 countries, with around 50 countries on the brink of famine. The causes and consequences of food insecurity are closely intertwined with gender, which plays a major role in how food is produced and consumed, which shapes the strategies that people employ to cope with, and it influences the manifold impacts of hunger and food security on the protection and well-being of all those affected. The most food insecure countries are also the most unequal countries in terms of gender. Gender equality is a basic human right and essential for peace, prosperous, and sustainable world. At various forums, India has strongly advocated women's empowerment across all spheres. In this regard, your working group must reflect on the basic issues of access to education, livelihood, basic resources, financial incentives, gender discrimination in the workplace, covering recruitment and promotion, as well as wage disparities, and the issue of women's leadership at all levels of decision-making in political, economic, and public life, as well as participation and retention of women and girls in the scientific and technical field. Your interventions must also examine seriously the various forms of domestic violence and gender-based harassment that, while endemic, was seen to have increased drastically across the globe during the period of the COVID-19 pandemic. We are at the midpoint of the SDGs, and all indications are that the world is still off track in achieving gender equality related goals and targets. While there are many supervening historical, structural, social, and mindset barriers that continue to block our progress, there can be little doubt that if the G20 and India in particular can significantly accelerate the implementation and achievements of the goal of women-led development, that in itself will constitute an unprecedented and historic achievement. We will need to build on the steps taken in Bali and launch transformative initiatives in order to ensure, among other things, greater financial inclusion, digital empowerment, as well as green economy participation to benefit women and persons with disabilities. Importantly, also, our work must include an exploration of how men can be strategically engaged to contribute to gender inclusion in policy and practice, with the understanding that shifting traditional gender norms will require the collaboration and contribution of everyone in society. I am sure this working group will deliberate on such multidimensional perspectives of women's empowerment and mainstreaming, and adopt a framework that cuts across all dimensions of life, intersects with all geographical and cultural contexts, covering both rural and urban spaces, and addresses the internal as well as the external capacities and resources available to them, so they contribute towards building a sustainable human community that empowers all human beings, irrespective of gender or disability. Equally related to addressing gender equality is addressing ableism, or the systematic exclusion of people with physical or mental disabilities. Improving such a situation requires us to locate viable pathways of disability inclusion that will provide practical benefits to differently abled individuals. We will need to focus on a range of need-based approaches, from providing physical access to individuals with disabilities into institutions, and then go on to ensure their access to appropriate education, healthcare, environment resources, skill building, employment, and other critical areas, so that they can lead a dignified life. Only in this way can we provide the basis that will enable vulnerable and marginalized communities to contribute meaningfully to addressing the other local and global challenges their peers commonly face. This working group must aim to reinforce the approaches and recommendations of previous C20 deliberations and contribute meaningfully to mainstreaming and institutionalizing equity and inclusion across sectors. One significant move in this direction could be to launch a gender and disability data alliance of G20 countries that could systematically collect, analyze, monitor, and evaluate data and policies in these priority areas. As for building on your mission and working in tandem with civil society organizations around the world, I'm happy to see that you have already, before the meeting, identified 4 areas that they can participate and network in order to effect change, whether by side events, policy dialogues, exemplary case studies, or lobbying with governments on implementation. I am confident that your working group will be able to identify what you have described as high impact and actionable policy proposals in the multiple relevant sub-themes for consideration by the C20 summit in July, and then take them forward for the G20 leaders to reflect on during their own summit in October this year. My best wishes to you, and thank you.
Thank you, sir, for touching upon some of the most crucial intersections of the gender dialogue and of ableism. We hope we can collectively work towards a more gender harmonious and a more inclusive society for all. And moving forward, we will be introducing the Gender Equality and Disability Working Group. So I invite the 3 coordinators of the working group on gender equality and disability to now introduce to us the working groups, their structure, and the ways that the organization and partners can contribute.
Thank you so much. Namaskar to everyone, and hello, I'm Niti Goyal, one of the coordinators, co-coordinator of the Gender Equality and Disability Working Group. I'd like to begin by thanking our respected chair and Swamiji for their inspiring words, for motivating us today, as well as our really beloved and respected Sherpa, Nambiar ji, for giving us direction, as well as for showing tremendous faith in the potential of this working group. Do we have the PowerPoint up? Yes?
Yes, we do now.
Yes, thank you so much. The first slide, we're basically taking this opportunity for the next 20 minutes to take you through what this working group means. What do we say? What do we mean when we say gender equality and disability working group? And why do we have this inaugural event today? Can we go to the next slide, please? We'll just take you through the agenda of the call, but also our presentation. Of course, to introduce you to our working group, to share the process followed, as well as the sub-themes that have been created and the thought behind the creation of these sub-themes. We very proudly introduce the advisory board of this working group, as well as our initial partners who've come on board. We'd like to share a basic timeline that we've created. As you know, the G20 presidency, each country holds for a year, and the C20 efforts need to then be inputted into the G20 summit. And then we will take you through the possibilities of participating within the C20 working group of gender equality and disability as civil society from India as well as globally. Can we go to the next slide, please? What is the objective of our working group? When we say gender equality and disability, it is basically to ensure that civil society concerns, that our concerns related to gender and disability inclusion are taken into account in G20 leaders' discussions, and that the recommendations we come up with collectively get translated into the G20 declarations as policies as well as commitments. We're also hoping that these policies and recommendations then later get implemented within each G20 country. Can you go to the next slide? The process and workflow. As you can imagine, we've undertaken a very rigorous process, very meticulously arrived at the formation of this working group, the sub-themes, and so on. So when did the working group get set up? In November. It was, of course, officially announced at the inaugural ceremony held in January. Civil 20 conducted a massive outreach over emails to understand from civil society, what do we or they consider as priorities. And we are very happy to share that there were more than 1,200 responses that the C20 Secretariat received. These responses have been analyzed, and then the working groups were created. So gender equality and disability is not just a continuum, but also a need that arose from civil society inputs. We wanted to, of course, maintain the continuity from C20 Indonesia, because we are talking about 20 countries and civil societies from 20 countries. We had our working group handover from Indonesia in December, to be precise, on 28th December. The work that they did, the experiences that they had were shared, the processes were discussed, and we've actually even invited one of the coordinators of the Gender Equality and Disability Working Group, who was also the sous chef of C20 Indonesia, Ms. Risnawati Utami, to be a part of this working group as a member of the advisory board. Of course, the policy packs from the last 5 years of C20 were analyzed to propose a process, a structure, and timelines for our working group here in India. Sub-themes were identified based on the previous year's policy recommendations, civil society concerns, as well as the analysis, the framework of analysis of all of these policy packs. We then went on to mapping sub-themes, because mapping sub-themes from other G20 tracks, including other working groups, engagement groups, Sherpa tracks, and Panan tracks were really crucial for us. We then identified early partners, used the period from December to January, and accessed the database from Indonesia, as well as the 1,200 responses from the initial outreach from India, the official list of CSOs from UN, and the responses received from the participation form within the C20 structure. What we propose to do further is to hold thematic meetings from February to April, May, over the next few months, basically, in the in-person mode as well as the virtual mode. And we will also be collecting udaharans, which is best practices and exemplary cases within gender equality and disability. And then after the deliberations in the sub-themes, the consultations that we organize and the udaharans that we received, it will be analyzed and compiled into a strong policy brief that would be actionable and implementable in G20 countries. We're finally saying that we ensured continuity and inclusivity as well by analyzing just the working groups of the C20 within the last 5 years. Priority areas, policy paths, conducting online meeting with their members, all so that we could bring a strong working group together to include sub-themes to bring social justice issues under gender equality and disability inclusion, and to do justice to our civil society within the country as well as across G20 states. I will now invite our national coordinator, Dr. Bhavaniji, to take over from here for the rest of the presentation.
Thank you so much, Nidhi. We can move to the next slide. I will take us a little deeper into the proposed sub-themes that were outlined in the video. Let me start with safety and security. And this is, it's very clear that in addition to the human rights violation that gender-based violence, GBV, is, there is a significant economic cost to the state that could be avoided were GBV were eliminated. It is estimated that women who experience violence earn approximately 35% less than those who are not abused, a significant drain on national economies. In 2021, the European Union estimated that the cost of GBV was around 366 billion euros annually. Violence against women makes up about 79% of this cost, amounting to about 289 billion euros. It's not just about money. The impact of generational discrimination and violence against women and other marginalized groups not only reinforces unequal power dynamics, but also stunts their personal growth and the development of the victim, the aggressor, and any children or other dependents in their life. So this is a very important sub-theme for us. Moving on to the second sub-theme, which is on environment and disasters. Women are recognized as the agents of change in transition to a low-carbon economy, and identifies their role as a part of the labor force, as consumers, as decision makers. Integrating gender equality is essential for the successful completion of a circular economy, management of natural resources, digital innovation, among other key areas. Prevailing social cultural norms, however, and their extension to societal and economic structures limit their access to economic opportunities in environmentally sustainable activities and environmental leadership positions, both in public and private sectors. When it comes to disasters, women, other genders, and people with disabilities and children are among the most vulnerable of populations. The built environment should embrace policies that consider these vulnerabilities both during normalcy and especially so during disasters. Moving on to the sub-theme on society and culture. Whether gender equality or disability is concerned, society and culture present some of the largest and the most difficult barriers to overcome. The attitudes and norms that emerge from social and cultural environments impact virtually all aspects of life for all genders and for people with disabilities. Cultural implications around women, other genders, and work outside of the traditional impact their lives, their family, and the economy. This is true of all other sub-themes we have identified. We are particularly interested in forefronting the elements that CSOs identify as key priorities in this sub-theme to bring attention to this topic's vital importance in this domain. Moving now to physical and mental health. Physical and mental health permeates all components of gender equality and foundational to people with disabilities. An individual's health dictates whether or not they are functioning and productive member of society. And there are too many instances of preventable health complications occurring among marginalized populations due to lack of access, social stigma, etc. Through discussions with CSOs, we will identify the most critical challenges and illuminate the path to overcome these barriers and achieve a greater equality in the health domain. Now to education and skill development. Making education and skills accessible to all genders and people with disabilities, reduce the digital divide, and thereby reducing inequality and enabling their participation in the economy is at the heart of this sub-theme. Women and girls are disproportionately denied or restricted access to education and skilling, which can negatively impact the GDP, national growth rates, lifetime earnings of women, child marriage rates, child and maternal mortality rates, domestic violence, and many other indications of development and progress. Advancing equal access to education, including STEM education, and promoting women's leadership in positions are plausible ways to bridge this gap. Moving to economic empowerment and sustainable livelihoods, ensuring economic inclusivity is among the critical areas of sustainable development. It is essential to provide full and productive employment and decent work for all to promote inclusive and sustainable economic growth. However, gender-based discrimination and discrimination toward people with disabilities has been witnessed in formal and in informal economic settings, causing difficulties for them to realize socio-economic self-reliance. Such discrimination is manifested through exclusion from participation, hiring and promotion, workplace harassment, pay discrepancies and loss of opportunity, and gender-based biased benchmarks and expectations of performance. Such issues are exacerbated and made even more complex in the wake of disasters and conflicts, requiring multidisciplinary and multi-stakeholder approaches to address this properly. This sub-theme will explore and reflect on related policy gaps and challenges and suggest creative and pragmatic adjustments, existing and new, which can be implemented to greater levels of equality in economic settings. We have another very unique angle that we would like to take on that has been reflected by the speakers that have preceded, is to address the root cause of inequality by engaging men and boys. Despite decades of concerned effort and extensive funding by governments and NGOs and other stakeholders, gender equality still persists. There is mounting evidence that this slow progress is partly due to a failure to address the root socio-cultural norms. Gender equality is a disruptive process that seeks to restructure the social distribution of power and privilege towards a more harmonious society. If we hope to achieve this goal, all members of society should participate in this process. Unfortunately, the inclusion of men and boys and a deeper understanding of gendered social structures have been missing in conventional approaches to gender equality and women's empowerment. The sub-theme seeks to address this gap by recommending actionable solutions that engage men and boys as champions of change and reflect the diversity of gender identity and social norms to more effectively push society towards gender equality. Last but not the least, this has been a cross-cutting dialogue is on disability. Sustainable development will require the empowerment of all vulnerable and marginalized groups, leaving no one behind, by ensuring access to necessary resources and improved opportunities for their productive participation in societal progress. Further, it's critical to ensure our cities and human settlements are more inclusive, safe, and sustainable. Unfortunately, the visibility and representation of people with disabilities have remained relatively limited in global conversations and actions on sustainable development. This sub-theme will explore pathways to mainstream inclusion for the differently abled. It will reflect on improved and strategic alternative forms of education, inclusive growth and employment, and interventions for promoting universal dignity, improving accessibility of resources and infrastructure, and assessing policy design and implementation through data collection and monitoring. This kind of takes us through all the sub-themes. If we can go to the next slide. As you can see, there is a lot of work that is packed into this framework, which we hope is pretty exhaustive. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. Just a look at our stellar advisory board. Members from the advisory board come from, they're either experts knowledge experts, or they're very renowned CSOs who have worked many, many years in the field. There are also members from the government. So we have a very diverse advisory group. Each one of them has knowledge, deep knowledge on the working sub-themes that we have identified. Let me quickly read out the list, and many of them are here for the program. Again, acknowledging your presence and thanking you for your contribution to the working group. We have Ambassador Gopinathan A. He's the Chief Inspector of the Joint Inspection Unit of the United Nations. He hails from India. Ms. Naila Chowdhury, Global Advisor for Cure Violence Global and the Chairperson for Women for Empowerment in the United States. Thank you, Naila ji, for joining us. Uma Mahadevan Das Gupta, Principal Secretary for Panchayati Raj, Government of Karnataka, India, very powerful woman with a lot of work in her years working in rural communities and especially towards women's empowerment. Ela Inoscu, from UN Women in Turkey. Again, she also has done years of work of women in the environment and has deep knowledge across the world on the challenges faced by women. Honorable Meera Khadakar, Bharatiya Sri Shakti, India. Ma'am has, again, a lot of experience also on the socio-cultural implications on gender equality and people with disabilities. Anjali Menon, co-founder of Women in Cinema Collective. She is a very noted filmmaker and is known for making very thought-provoking movies, mainstream media movies on the roles of women, and features very strong women in her movies. Cara Molinari is an author, a coach and activist for women empowerment in France. Deepa Narayan is a prolific author who's written over 50 books, worked with the World Bank, is the founder of the Chup Circle in the United States. She's known for her very deep understanding of women both on the social side as well as the economic side. Preeti Patkar, the co-founder of and director of Prerana India, has worked with in the red light district for the past 30 years in Mumbai and has a very deep understanding of the violence against women and trafficking of children. Swamini Amrita Jyoti Prana is the president of Embracing the World France and is a representative in Europe of the Mata Amritanandamayi Center. Again, is deeply networked in Europe and has great interest in the area of gender equality. Swami Dayamritananda Puri, Executive Director of the Mata Amritanandamayi Center in the US, is also somebody with a lot of very profound, deep connections and is very interested in the area of women and the environment. Charu Sinha, IPS officer, head of the Central Reserve Police Force in Srinagar sector in India. She is a known vigilante in terms of gender equality and has done several programs in gender sensitization across the police forces and the CRPF forces. Medha Somya, the director of MAD Solutions and Services for Social Initiatives in India, is a great-hearted being with decades of social service experience to her, this thing especially in skill development and in gender and in disability. Gabriella Wright is the co-founder of Never Alone in the US, paid a lot of attention to the mental health of women, and she has been a constant advocate of mental health and prevention of suicides. Krishnawati Uttami is the founder of Ohana Indonesia. She was a part of the C20 deliberations in Indonesia last year, and we are thrilled to have her guidance also with us this year, and her area is on disability. Dharmawan Prasteya is a social policy officer of the Prakarsa. This is the main organization in Indonesia, C20, that was the secretariat and led a lot and were primarily involved in the inclusion of disability as one of the main themes. And so we carry on the legacy that Indonesia left for us. Last, we have Daniel Hurster. He is the chairman of the IFA. He comes from the finance background. As you know, that ultimately the G20 reflects on finance. And so to make sure that we bring to the table through our discussions what the G20 really wants to hear is the financial implications of all what we are proposing in terms of policy. Can go to the next slide. Okay. I'll pause now. Okay, so we have already some exciting collaborations that we have had, and very happy to say that we have a wonderful collaboration now with Women 20, Dr. Sandhya Purecha, who is also on the call. She's on the meeting. Thank you, Sandhya ma'am, for your support. We've also had informal working relationships with Y20, and we will hope to have their presence in every one of our conversations. We've also started working to make relationships with both the Think 20 and also the Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, considering that 80% of agricultural laborers are women. Can go to the next slide. And here I will hand over the mic to Meg, and she will pick it up from here.
Thank you very much, Bhavani. And once again, it's a pleasure and an honor to be with you today at the inauguration of our working group on gender equality and disability. My role here is to take you through the timeline. You're looking here at an overview of our timeline. And the next slide will be a detailed view of the timeline. Then we're going to look at some side events. And fourth and final, I'm going to take you through some of the entry points for engagement. But before I do that, I'd like to recognize, of course, Swami Amrita Vishwa here is representing Amma, who is the chair of the C20, and her guidance. I'd also like to recognize Vijay Nambiar. He has a colossal job, ladies and gentlemen, as our Sherpa, taking our output into the work of the overall C20. It's not a small job. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us today. And we're in your hands when it comes to conveying the salient points of our work to the broader group. Honored to have you here. I'd also like to recognize my sisters Bhavani and Nidhi as the coordinators of this group. But before I go into the depth, I'd also like to recognize the participants. I'm the international coordinator here, so I was thrilled to see that we have participation from 13 countries. I'd like to take you through that. And I apologize if I miss anybody, but we have significant representation from India, but also from France, the United States, Indonesia, Kuwait, Egypt, Australia, the Gambia, China, Italy, the United Kingdom, South Korea, and Switzerland. Thank you all for joining. And this, of course, is our kickoff to this journey. What we'd like to see is your continued participation as we go forward. I'm going to show you on the last slide the link for how you can sign up to join our working group. I'd also like to point out that at the very start of this chat, the link was also in the chat. So if you'd like to scroll up, you can also find the link to fill in the form to join the working group there. And of course, as this is the working group on gender equality and disability, I'd like to recognize our interpreters for the very good work they're doing as well. Thank you so much to our interpreters. So the overview of the timeline is in front of you. And you can see that we've already had the kickoff of the C20 inaugural meeting in January. We're at the second point here at our Gender Equality and Disability Working Group inaugural meeting. And after this, the real work begins. And we're looking forward to having you on this journey with us. In March, there is the C20 Inception meeting in India. We have our own main event in April. Please plan that in your diaries now to participate in that meeting, the 22nd, 23rd of April, where we'll be having our first discussion on policy. Then we have, after that, we have in May, we have the governmental meetings, particularly a meeting with the G20 that we're very much looking forward to. And then after that, we move to the sharing of our final policy pack recommendations. They're going to be based on white papers. I'm going to return to this important point of white papers 2 slides from now. And then in July, we have the C20 summit. So as you can see, that we're moving here from In parallel, there's the work of our working group on gender equality and disability, other working groups within the C20, feeding into recommendations which are going to be considered by the leaders of the G20 member states later this year. Next slide, please. Now, when we look at these timelines, the first thing you're going to notice is how tight they are. We have the concept note that is actually due next week. The week after that, we will have prepared the zero draft of our policy brief. And then, this is important for you to note, the period between the 15th of February and the 31st of May, this is your moment for engagement. We encourage you to rally the support of your organisation and your association to participate in the webinars, meetings, discussions and consultations that we will set out, that are set out in the next slide, under each of the sub-themes. Those deliberations are going to lead to the development of so-called white papers by each of the sub-themes. And this is where your input can be captured in the white papers developed by each of the sub-themes. I'm going to say more about that on the next slide. Between June the 1st and the 30th, we have this other important work that you can participate in, which is the identification of udaharans, and that's been mentioned before. These are the best practiced examples. And as has been said before, what we're looking for there is best practice from within G20 member states that can then be replicated in other G20 states as well. So this is very important for you to think about best practices in those areas identified in the sub-themes and to submit your suggestions to our working group. Again, the link is in the next slide. And of course, we're preparing a final communique as output from our working group and the policy brief. Now, the policy brief is very brief. It's only 2,500 words. So we're going to be drawing from the recommendations that you'll be suggesting in the sub-themes, and which will be capsulated in the white papers. So think of it this way. Your engagement path is to participate in a webinar or a face-to-face meeting, or to propose to host a webinar or a face-to-face meeting, the outcome of which will be input into a white paper under that sub-theme. The emphasis is on addressing a challenge and corresponding recommendations. And as Bhavani mentioned at the outset, which was underlined by Mr. Nambiar, these need to be looking at the areas of policy gaps in the context of the G20. Yes? So the iteration underlining that the right to education is important. In the context of our working group, it's the realization of the right to education in terms of gender equality, participation of women and girls, or women and men, and then also looking at the access of disabled persons as well. And then even within that, looking at a further drill down into gaps in G20 member states and making recommendations as to how we can improve in those areas as G20 member countries, across G20 member countries. And of course, the best way to explain anything is through an example. So if you have examples, please submit your examples. Again, the link is on the next page. Now, looking here at you'll notice it says first policy dialogues planned. This is not an exhaustive list. There is room here for you to suggest work that could be undertaken by your organization in consultation and partnership with one of the members from the working group. So you'll see here that we have an online webinar for safety and security and engaging men coming up in just a few days. That will be followed by a face-to-face meeting in Srinagar on safety and security and engaging men. And then on the 21st of February, we have a second online webinar on economic empowerment and sustainable livelihoods. The 23rd of February, another online webinar, education and skill development. And then we move in early March to face-to-face policy dialogues on economic empowerment and sustainable livelihoods. And in April on education and skill development. This is a short and not finite list. So there's opportunities there for you for engagement. Now, if we look to the next slide, please. We've highlighted some dates around which you may like to concentrate some of your activity because these are internationally recognized days. For example, the International Day for Women in Science, which is on the 11th of February. We then have a hackathon that's being undertaken by one of our groups on the 18th to 19th of February. There's World Social Justice Day on the 20th of February. World Wildlife Fund has stepped in and proposed an event in March. We have a STEM event on the 1st of March, and we're looking at Zero Discrimination Day on the 1st of March. The 1st of March is obviously quite a busy period, just before International Women's Day. And I know that many of the organizations, associations, and networks represented on this call will have an event for International Women's Day. What we would propose is that you consider in your topic how that topic intersects with policy gaps in G20 member states so that you can sharpen your recommendations to be submitted to this group. Then we have the United Nations World Health Day on the 7th of April and World Environment Day, very important, increasing importance, on the 15th of June. So can we go to the next slide, please? While the slides are changing, I'd like to remind you that our period of work extends only from basically today until pretty much July. The most intense period of activity for working groups, for webinars, meetings, discussions, and consultations takes place between now and the 31st of May. So if you're thinking of doing anything, now is the time to complete the form that is at the bottom of the page there. The link is at the bottom of the page there. To complete the form in that link to let us know what it is you're considering doing, as an organization or as an association. And may I take an opportunity to make this clear? This is an engagement group through organizations and associations. So please have your organization and association submit the topics that you'd like to participate on, indicate the working groups, the sub-themes that you would like to be part of in that form. Now, what is it that's taking place? How can you participate? Once again, indicate you would like to participate by using the form in the link at the bottom of this page. And there are 4 ways that you can participate. The first is, as I've already mentioned, to organise a side event between now and the end of May. This would need to be done in consultation with the working group to have it under our working group banner. So please indicate which sub-theme you would like to have that under in that form at the bottom of the page. Secondly, organising policy dialogues. This is where you can engage in webinars on our list that have already been put in the calendar, and those we're going to be putting into the calendar in the future. These webinars and consultations will lead to the development of white papers by the sub-themes. Udaharans, providing examples of good practice is critical, so that we can make the recommendations and then demonstrate how these can be implemented to the G20 member leaders, to the leadership, and those can also be submitted in the form at the bottom of the page. And in terms of implementation, it's currently raining here in Australia. I'm in Australia, and there's been a lot of focus here on policy recommendations. Now, it's one thing to recommend policy. It's another thing to have policy adopted, to have policy monitored, and then to have policy evaluated to see the effectiveness of the policy, and then to have the policy improved through yet another round of recommendations on how a policy might be improved. This is cyclical, like the seasons. It's a constant flow. Our work starts here, it does not end here. So we're looking forward to ongoing engagement with you on this. I'd like to welcome, once again, underline that we have people here, participants from Indonesia, the immediate past presidency of the G20. The next presidency will be held by the government of Brazil. So we're looking forward to the engagement of Brazil as well, so that the recommendations that we will be making, we need to see lobbying for the implementation of those, the adoption of those recommendations, the implementation of those recommendations going forward. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why we have a C20. That is why we're all here on the call today, because it's civil society that is the loudest voice in calling on the government for change and to ensuring that that policy that is once adopted, that it is implemented, and ensuring through monitoring and evaluation that it is effective, and when it's not, when further changes need to be made, that we have that cycle of further recommendations going deeper into these areas and repeating this cycle again. So our work is not only from today, it's a commitment, ladies and gentlemen. Fortunately, under the leadership of Amma, under the presidency of the government of India, we have a very strong government leading the G20 deliberations this year, and we have strong leadership under Amma, and we are also in the hands of Mr. Nambiar as he takes our work into the broader G20 dialogue. I'd like to thank you all for listening to these slides, and I would encourage you to please note down that link at the bottom of the page there and get involved. Thank you.
Thank our coordinators, Dr. Bhavani Rao, Professor Meg Jones, and Ms. Nidhi Goyalji for walking us through the working group structure and showing us the different avenues for participation. Dear dignitaries and viewers, thank you for staying with us throughout. We have come to the end of our inaugural event for Gender Inequality and Disability of C20 India. So, after the word of thanks, we have a tiny video explaining the motto and the logo, "You are the light." Kindly stay with us for a few minutes after the word of thanks has been offered. And now, to offer the word of thanks, I request Nidhi Goyalji, Director Rising Flames, to kindly take the virtual dais.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for listening in patiently and giving us this extra time to present to you the ways of participation, the ways of collective work, and the ways of solidarity. Once again, namaskar, sabhi ko. Hello, everyone. I'm Amrita Vishwa, and I'm really honored to be delivering this vote of thanks. Not just as one of the coordinators of the Gender Equality and Disability Working Group, but also today as someone from civil society, someone from the community of women, community of persons with disabilities. I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to each one of you for joining us today, but really from the beginning of the journey of our working group. Yes, for today's event, we've come to the moment where we need to close, but this is actually the beginning of our deliberations, our work, our efforts, our participation and our engagement. As Professor Meg mentioned, there's a lot to do and a very, very, very little time that we have to produce something that's actionable, implementable, and that will be strong with voices of the civil society. As civil society in India, as people's voices across G20 and the globe, our collective participation is critical. Critical because this will ensure that the economic development is humane, it is just, and it is sustainable. Gender equality and disability inclusion is not a simple social justice issue. It is, of course, a human right. It is important for economic development and to build a progressive as well as productive economy. We all know, Dr. Bhavani mentioned the cost of the impact that GBV has on the economy. And we also know the cost of exclusions of persons with disabilities could be as much as or as high as 7% of a GDP of a country. We know that these costs are really, really high. As a country, we will and we must ensure that we lead by example and encourage all 20 countries or all the countries within the G20 group to adopt the recommendations made by our civil society collectively and implement policies around disability inclusion and gender equality for a sustainable, equitable, inclusive, as well as a resilient growth. In this C20 journey, let us refocus on the commitments made by us as a global community towards sustainable development, the goals, the Agenda 2030, the goals that outline gender equality, that talk about access to education, to livelihoods, to basic rights and resources, to access to inclusive and safe communities, and so on. We're hoping that we make this C20 and every C20 a people's movement where we reach our youth, our villages, our educational institutions, and amplify all voices through policy recommendations. To close, I'd like to thank our revered chair, Amma, our official representative, respected and revered Swamiji, our government of India for its strong leadership, respected Sherpa, C20, Shri Nambiarji, our secretariat, and all the members of the secretariat, Rambhao Malvi Prabodhini, the Troika members, the core group members, all the steering committee members of civil society, the International Advisory Committee of C20, my learned colleagues, Dr. Bhavani ji and Professor Meg, the entire team that helped us put together this work and will be carrying this work forward. Congratulations and gratitude towards your efforts. Our really, really august group of advisors for the working group. We're really grateful for your participation, constant advice and guidance. Our technical team, as well as the sign interpreters who made this event happen and possible. And lastly, but not the least, thank you to each of the civil society member who's present here across 13 countries. Each of you who has pledged their commitment towards building a better world together, because nothing can happen about us without us. And we must remember, you are the light. Thank you so much. Please stay on for the video. Once again, deep and heartfelt gratitude to each of you for being here.